Yes, the Boohoo Effect here. Now, this will just be a brief overview of my personal history that I've had with James D. You see, my initial encounter with James was around 2015 when I was exchanging with Monograph and Agent 19 at that time. And also at that time, James was also bantering back and forth with those same two. Now, myself, I just minded my own business and let them do their own thing, as I didn't know what was the main issue between them all. Eventually, James made a comment onto my thread, and of course, not knowing him at all, I responded kindly to him. That's my nature. In fact, I always have been cordial with James D. Never had an issue with him at all. In fact, I thought he was an alright guy. Sincere and straightforward, it seemed like. But as time goes on, I found out differently. And also at that time period, I was trolling with an old school troll who was around back in that day. I'm not going to go into mention who he was because this is one of the few, if not the only person who is able to stay true and consistent with his agenda. You know, a person that can be trusted and was just a good person who was calling out certain individuals at that time that was gang stalking others. It was real intense back then. There was more trolls in larger groups. But this guy stayed on course, and I respect him for that. Now, James was also hovering around then, sort of clinging to this guy as well. Well, I wasn't clinging to him. I just kind of had a relationship with him. We were communicating together and sort of discussing things behind the scene. But James took an interest to this guy. You know, this guy was, stroking James's ego a little bit, goading him on, to stay the course. But James, no doubt, was looking to this guy for support in defending himself against Agent 19 and Monograph. Now, this was actually when I started to pick up that James D is very, very sensitive. He is actually one of the most sensitive people I've ever met. The red flags were very small, but they were there. Let's just say that when you don't baby and coddle James D with attention and reassurance, he starts to get a little snide and he plays these little subtle little mind games. So shallow that I don't even care to describe in further detail, and which James will certainly deny. Nothing directly towards you, but in his actions you could consider them to be underhanded and underlying. You see, like I mentioned, I've never gotten involved with James's beef with Monograph and Agent 19. And this is probably what triggered James's insecurities. His little ego. Because, that's how pea brains operate. You got to baby them. There's small space in that mind of theirs. As time went on, though, James never left this part of the scene, as some people can see. He's been sticking around, bouncing around, wondering what people are saying, being sensitive to what this person's saying, going around correcting it, hopping over this live, basically policing his name, policing his securities. But, he was introduced to this particular small scene back in 2015 when he was bantering with Monograph and Agent 19. As stated himself, he would make YouTube drama his life. Yes, James said that out of his own mouth. James will come home, as he said, from work and spend his time arguing with people instead of using that valuable, limited time spent with his own kid. As they tend to grow up fast, right? But that doesn't matter. What matters to James is his off time of what he wants to do. During the days of Google Plus, when James would be consistently supporting various gang stalkers there, in which he denies. But James, he's a gang stalker. He supports them. Sometimes it's not exactly what he does that's so pronounced, it's what he doesn't do. And he goads them along, laughs it off, pats them on the shoulder, gives them a thumbs up. Oh, yes, James is very much a group affiliated gang stalker. He is. He sticks in groups, but he acts like, he plays it off like he's just this neutral, all around, happy go lucky guy. But you can see his own actions for yourself, and you can see how he acts in his lives, can you not? And James makes this claim that I had made. He's repeatedly made this claim that I had made a mean comment to him while he was fighting with Agent 19 in Montegraph at that time, years ago. I told him, James, I don't remember this at all, and I'm not sure why I would make such derogatory comment to you when I don't even know you. That's my nature. It's not in my nature to pick fights or to nag on people and insult them for no reason. But I told him, I went on to say to James, but if I did, James, I apologize. He accepted. Then sometimes, sometime later, time has passed. Then James again would bring up how I made this mean comment to him before. So again, I commented on his page and told him that I already apologized to you for this, James. And what more can I do? I cannot change the past. At this point, I definitely chalked up James to be ultra sensitive, mentally weak. What else would it be? This guy likes to constantly accuse others of being sensitive. But really, think about it. Who really is the sensitive one? And why is this particular subject matter on James's mind? Doesn't it take a sensitive person to be constantly recognize how other people are sensitive all the time? Yes, I think it does. But with myself, it's years of observation and personal experience with James. But James likes to throw that out there, how everybody's sensitive. That's why he stays in his garage for, 20 some hours sometimes? And we can only surmise what he's doing to stay up that long. I'm not going to mention any type of drug, but James will do that on the weekends. He's been doing this stuff before COVID-19. I know lately James likes to blame it on this pandemic that we're currently still living in, but James has been doing this a long time. He comes home on the weekends instead of socializing like normal people do back in the day before COVID-19. James would come home and he would start drinking. And back then, before, Google Hangouts or Live was real popular, James would get drunk, go on videos, and go on these long, disturbing rants. Getting all emotional and angry and just shedding all these tears of what's on his mind, getting it off his shoulders and what's bugging him and who said this. I mean, this guy is sensitive. And this YouTube trolling and stalking is James' social life. It truly is. I mean, he has adopted this trolling as his form of morbid recreation for himself. And, considering how really sensitive James is, maybe this type of activity is not just for James. Maybe James needs to reevaluate if this is truly healthy for him, as it seems to drive James to drink harder. It seems to get James real emotional because, if you're this sensitive, then you might want to reassess what you're doing on the weekends. Maybe you'll be happier, more positive if you just stay away from the internet. But in recent months, during our beefs with certain individuals, James again, for whatever reason, and usually always when he is well drunk, of course, will come in here and there, make these backbiting comments about how I get upset when he comments onto my adversary's video threads, poking the bull, expecting not to get the horns. He's also had made a few comments on UK Trolls live streams. Again, falsely accused me of making comments to him. I'm jealous of him talking to Tracy. But nowhere does James ever show any proof of these claims. Nothing. We just got to take James' word for it, right? Since he's a real credible person, right? No doubt, in his severe inebriation state, compels James's most inner insecurities to comes out when he's drinking. Doesn't it seem to go that way with James when he's really drunk off his butt? He just seems to get more emotional, more defensive, more paranoid, more sensitive, as you can see in his lives. James himself will admit that it's progressive from going from the point of sober to buzzed to smash drunk. It's a gradual effect that James will gradually get more emotional, more angry. He starts yelling around in his garage, with his armoire in the background, housing his clothes, because he lives in there. He's got to swish in the air once in a while to get that motion detector on, again, every, 2 hours. Continues to rant on. Gets up, gets a beer. You know the routine. Starts prancing around, showing off to the camera. Strutting around, showing off his 5'8" status. Then coming back onto the camera. At this point, I have already been exercising patience with this guy, if you want to call him a guy. Because I don't know many guys getting involved in all this gossiping drama with a bunch of women. I mean, Alyssa Woman has a little bit more of excuse, but not with James. James gets right in there in the mix, doesn't he? With all these females arguing with this person and that person. And it just so happens that they're mostly female. It's like because that's James' mindset. It's almost like he's got these natural female hormones and emotions rolling around inside of his brain. Naturally clicks and jives with these women and gets right in there. Never seen anything like it. Where there's heavy drama, there's James D. And another time, for instance, on one of his drunken lives, he and Sentinel Spitfire were calling out trolls to meet up with them for a physical fight. They were going on and on and on for hours, basically claiming that they are the toughest and biggest, baddest trolls around these parts, and how everyone else is cowards on the internet. Yeah, one of those people. So, after seeing a few of those type of lives, I made a comment onto James' thread, taking him up on this challenge. He initially approved of it. I then told him the stakes, and a few hours later, what does James do? He deletes the whole thread. Then he eventually just puts the video on private. This issue went on to other users' live chats that was helping me get the word out that I was pretty much just taking James up on his challenge. And again, James stated that I was cool and how he had no problem with me. So I said, okay, cool. Problem squashed again. But soon after, James went on a live with Tracy, and eventually I saw James on there again, bringing up my name, probably getting more inebriated and making another false claim that I have a problem with him and how I've been accusing him of taking sides with past individuals. The same old song and dance. People that I've had problems with before, even agreeing with one of Katie's child stalking accusations that she likes to wage against everybody. There was James, agreeing with her. And this is when I thought, okay, James, now I'm going to call you out soon on some real things, real facts about you, not lies. So I made a comment on how he lied about being in Ranger School. Of course, he just sidetracked the whole issue. Why? Because James is lying about his credentials, about his military service. But now James D is now claiming lately that he just merely signed up for Ranger School. He just signed up, you see. He wasn't in active service, active training. He just signed the paper. And that's what prompted, apparently, for James to go around saying, making the claims that he was a Ranger. Now that, in my book, is valor thieving. James then posted a video to me, then deleted it, ranting about this, ranting about that, because he's so sensitive. And James had done exactly what I predicted he would do. Because I have observed James for a long while now. Once you get to know this guy, though, you start to get to know and be acquainted with his perks, his little mind games that he likes to play with people. It's very subtle, but it's there. He likes to, poke the pig and cause contention and tries to create divisions and infighting. That's what James likes. He thinks it's funny. He'll laugh about this stuff. He's sadistic that way. He's got this sort of stalkerish mindset about himself as well. He's all over the board. To this present date, James has made several current claims, though, that all turned out to be utter lies. And he has lied about doing time in prison. A little joke, supposedly he was playing during the time that Professor Doom was actually heading to prison for an actual crime. And people had believed him. He later came clean on this lie. He admitted to Spitfire that he made it all up. Making up some changed over story, how he did it, to troll Monograph because Monograph was trolling him the same way. That was basically his reasoning. Yeah, and that rumor started about, bled into James supposedly making the claim that he held up a bar with a BB gun. This, I'm not sure about, but it's no doubt stems from just one another of James's outlandish storytelling. I mean, this guy lies are mounting very high. Like his storytelling how he had purchased his own house. A story James D. created. Why? To appear that he's above you, that he's successful, that he's not a loser, that he's not a drunk that doesn't own a thing in his name. And he likes this to use this as a battering ram, to club other people over the head, so to speak, and calling them losers, that he's better than them, right? To elevate himself, to elevate James's ego. Because, really, there's a very valid reason why James has to get smashed drunk. He's obviously escaping from something. Isn't that right, James? What are you hiding from, huh? Why do you have to escape the reality of things and eventually, head to that dreadful state that you got to wake up all over again and face reality, face the daytime, and do it all over again the next night? That must be a pretty sad life. But, as far as James's claim that he owns his own house, I already checked that out. It's all lies. Just another one of James's made up stories. James 100% lives with his mom, and he 100% was living for a while in a shelter house. Those are facts. And I can back this up. I'm not worried about it. Not worried about it at all. In time, I'll probably decide one day to back this up, make James look stupid again. At the end of the day, it is clear that James has many, many issues. Not just his blatant alcohol issue, though, as we've been discussing, but the way he treats his own kid, right on camera. I mean, I had tried to tell this so called parent to not include his child in his drunken rants. In grade school, arguing and screaming because one of these times his daughter is going to be the subject of being trolled herself. And what has recently happened? Yes, it eventually unfolded exactly the way I predicted it would. What was James' response to my warning? I don't give a fuck. I do what I want to do. It's my channel, bro. If you don't like it, don't watch. Do something. Do something. His gangster accent gets more pronounced as he gets drunk, right? Well, James, you're right. It is your channel, but it's not your young daughter's life. Your behavior is both reckless and irresponsible as a parent on your part, and there is no excuse for that. You can whine and try to twist it the other way around, as if it is the people who are trying to talk some sense into you that they are the ones that are the child abuser, not you. If they dare bring up your child and how you're treating her, they're the child abusers. They're stalking your child, not other people, not you. You're not treating child in an ill manner, in an irresponsible way. You see, I like how you try to twist things around. You know, you say, some of your gang stalker friends, like Katie, Tiffany, you tell the people and try to convince them that they're getting their information off of videos, and how these videos are all lies. How you're taking the word of a troll, right? But the irony is, James, those videos, a lot of them consist of raw data that video records people speaking themselves in their own words. You can't deny that. And also, James, you have a history of lying. So whose word are we really to not take as face value? Yours or video evidence? You see, James, the only real thing that you have proven that your drunken bouts of rage, garage screaming arguments, is more important to you than anything else in your life. You may not have worded it, confessed to this, but your actions speaks otherwise. You go by a person's actions because actions stems from a past decision that was carried out. And for those who excuse James's behavior, that it is affecting his personal family life in all aspects, you're just as guilty as him. You're just as irresponsible as James. You may not be carrying out those type of neglectful, abusive actions that he is, but you're carrying them out in heart. Because not only are you not saying anything against what this person is doing in his life in front of his family, but you're goading him on. You're patting him on the back and saying, it's okay. James, you're a good father. You're not doing nothing wrong. You see, that only encourages people continue to go on their wayward course. That doesn't get them to stop and think about what they're doing. That encourages them to carry out what they're doing that would be considered wrong. That's all I'm going to say about this subject. I have nothing else to say about James right now as far as doing a commentary. We'll see you in the next one.